Hello.
Hello, hello. How are you?
I'm doing great. I think I'm gonna take off our background now that we are live. I gotta figure out.
There you
Oh,
go.
that's
Oh,
better.
that's awesome.
That's
Cool.
better. Well, hello, Leslie.
How you doing, ma'am?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Excited to be here. Excited to be talking about all things books, business, and I love talking about brunch. So, like all those things, you're in the right place.
Oh my God, I love it. So, uh, welcome everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. As Leslie said, we love talking about books, business, and brunch. Although most of the time we're not at brunch, my coffee's almost done, so
Me too. I have
that's
one sip left. I'm saving it.
so yeah, mine is like a half a sip. But welcome if you're joining us for the first time. We are the leaders of Victorious You Press. I am the founder, Joan T. Randall, and Leslie is our COO and in charge of all things operation and project management and all that good stuff. And we love coming before you to talk about books, business, and brunch because as publishers and author coaches and writers, we want to make sure that you are putting your best foot forward when you are telling your story. And every person has a story on the inside, and your story deserves to be told. All right. So, today we have a very, very important topic. And so we want to make sure you grab your pen and your writing utensils or I don't know if Leslie has any. No, I don't think she has any slides, but Leslie is the woman with all things editing, all things editing. And I think our topic today is, I want to make sure we have it right. It is, mastering the art of self editing is our topic today. We've covered a lot of topics, okay? This is the list of topics that we have covered so far, all things highlighted. So we are really intentional when we bring you, our Monday afternoon, whether topics, we're really intentional. We're not just pulling it out of a hat. We have already secured 52 weeks of content that we want to talk to you about in the publishing sphere. So just know that we are intentional in what we're saying so that you have all of the tips, tools, strategies, everything you need to do the right thing when it comes on to telling your story. All right. And so today, Leslie is going to be the one that's going to be talking mostly about the editing piece of it. So I'll turn it over to her. Leslie, go for
All
it.
right. Self editing. Editing universally is a little bit of what I would call a tender topic. And I don't know about Joan, but I am a member of a few different groups on Facebook that are all about like self publishing and independent publishing and writers groups, all that sort of thing. And oh, wow, editing, hot, hot, hot topic. You would not believe, unless you saw it for yourself, how many people that are writers that are perhaps seasoned writers don't understand the importance of an editor. It's so important. It is so important. We could do, and maybe we will do a whole presentation on why having an independent editor is important. So just know that you need to have someone besides you, your mother, your sister, your aunt, edit your book. But before that comes self editing. And so many people also don't really get what's the deal with self editing. Isn't it true that all I need to do is write my book? Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'll run it through some grammar checking software, and then my editor is supposed to do that. They're going to do the rest of it. Nope, time out. Think about this for just a moment. If you were an editor, put yourself in that hot seat for just a moment, and you received two manuscripts in one day. One manuscript is the manuscript where they did what I just said. They might have put it through Grammarly once, and then they send it off to you. And it's a hot mess. It's got grammar errors, It has spelling errors. It has contextual errors. It's sort of all over the place, and it jumps forward and it jumps back. And, you look at that as an editor and you're like, all right, this is going to take some work. I'm going to take a break. Let me go look at this other manuscript. The second manuscript that you got is something that a person already spent a great deal of time on. You can see right off the bat that there are certain components of this book, just by glancing at it, that are already the way they should be. So you have a manuscript that's kind of a mess, and you have a manuscript that's already semi-polished. You have about the same amount of time to contribute to both of those manuscripts. Which one do you think is going to be shining when you're finished? It's going to be the one that's already had a lot of work done on it. So when you think that it's not important to have a really polished piece of work before it goes off to an editor, just think for a moment about how much more enjoyable it's going to be for an editor to take a piece that has already been worked on and then take it to the next level, instead of taking a hot mess and going through it. And you'll be going through it in stages, right? Let's say you're going to do a spell check first, and now everything's spelled correctly. Okay, now I have to go through and check it for grammar. Spend that whole time going through the whole book, checking it for grammar. Now we're going to do the deep dive and do developmental editing. So you've already spent hours and hours before you even get to the developmental editing. So I hope that gives you just kind of a bird's eye view of why you want to spend that time getting your manuscript looking pretty tight before it ever goes to an editor. Is it finished? By all means, no. And nor is it supposed to be. You're an author, not an editor. Everybody has their place. You would not expect an editor to write your book. You would not expect your editor to develop your book cover. All of these pieces have who is the best at what they do working on the different components of your book. So let's take a few minutes and talk about what are the most common errors that editors see. So if you want to write these down, I highly suggest it, because then it puts you in a position to take care of those possible errors before it ever gets off to your editor's inbox. And these top 10 writing style errors actually come straight from an editor's desk. So this is what she sees most often. And the very first one is actually the first thing that I teach about when I am taking somebody through a book writing coaching process. And the most common thing that editors see is not establishing your hook. So what is a hook? It's just what it says it is. That is the one thing that captures your attention, boom, right off the bat. And you may think, well, how am I going to do that? Because the beginning of my book, the beginning of my story isn't really a boom moment. So the first thing that might surprise you is the beginning of your book most often is not the beginning of your story. The beginning of your book is at some point during your story that is the wow moment. So sometimes that's a negative thing. Sometimes that's a traumatic thing, a car accident, an assault, the loss of a job. Sometimes it's something really positive. You won an award that you could only dream of when you were young and you first started out in whatever industry that you are now an expert in. So if you're writing about that life, you're going to write about that day or that evening when you won this amazing award that you could only have dreamed of. So someone who has been drawn to reading your book is going to they're captured right off the bat. If she did it, maybe I can do it. I want to read how she got to that point. Or conversely, it's something that's traumatic and somebody reads that. You've got them. Now they want to know, how'd you ever get beyond that? How did you heal? How did you put your life back together? Whatever it is, that hook needs to be the one thing that grabs the person right at the beginning. And now you're going to carry them through to every word that you write, because they just have to see how it ends up. So that's number one. Number two is not developing well-rounded characters. Now, you may hear that and say, I'm writing nonfiction, so I'm writing about real people. Are those characters? Yes. For the sake of definition, the people in your story are the characters of your story, and you do want to develop them. And first and foremost, yourself, the person who is writing this book. Develop yourself all the way. We don't like to think of ourselves as people who make mistakes, right? We want to put our best foot forward. That's what we've always been taught. Don't let people see your tender underbelly. Well, when you're writing, if you're going to be honest, if you are going to tell the whole story, you need to tell the whole story about yourself. And nobody's perfect. We all have our little idiosyncrasies. We have the things that we've done that we're not proud of, me downright ashamed of, but they all make up the whole of who we are. So you need to, at some point, as you are writing your story, writing your book, you need to develop that person as a whole and the other characters, the other people that are in your story. Don't just show them in a bad light or a good light. You need to show them for who they are in a well-rounded way. And that takes a little bit of time to do that. Number 3 is an interesting one. It's writing unusually long paragraphs. Now, that can be a challenging thing, but if you have a whole page that is one paragraph, it's too long. So don't go on and on thinking, well, because I'm still on this same thought, I need to put it all into one paragraph. This is important because you want your reader to be able to sort of stay grounded into the story and not lost. And if one thought goes on and on and on and on, you may kind of get lost and forget where you are. And sort of in that same vein is not separating dialogue between more than one person, obviously, unless you're talking to yourself, it's more than one person, into separate paragraphs. So every time, let's say I'm writing about a conversation with Joan and I, Joan says something, that's a paragraph. Leslie says something, that's a paragraph. Joan responds. So each time a new person is saying something, you always want to put that into a new paragraph. And writing out of chronological order can be a real problem, again, because you're sort of losing people along the way. Now, there is somewhat of an exception to that. Let's say you are not writing your story that way. You're writing your story more about the development of the 5 pillars to having great organization. And you want to infuse some of you into this. And how did you get to the point where you felt so strongly about this that you wanted to write a book, or you felt you were an expert enough to write a book? So you may jump around a little bit there because you're holding to these pillars. And that's a little bit of a different story because you are still writing within those pillars. And so that's a way to ground your reader. But if you're writing something that is along the lines of a memoir, you want to be sure that you are writing chronologically, that you're not writing one paragraph here, jumping back, jumping forward. Now, can you do flash back and flash forward? Absolutely. But you always want to write so you're preparing your reader for that. Sort of set the stage for the fact that, let's say you're at a party and you have some kind of a trigger and you start to have this thought in your head about something that happened long ago. You wouldn't just want to start writing that because somebody would say, well, wait a minute, where are we? Are we at the party or are we back 10 years? So set the stage, let people know that you are looking back, you're having a flashback to another time in your life. And Joan, I'm just reeling these off here. So have any thoughts or anything you want to add to what we've kind of done? I think is the first 5 most common things that we see.
Yeah, I mean, those are great because that's one of the things as a publisher I find difficulty sometime in reading someone, especially if they're an author for the first time, and not even first time authors. They are authors that have written more than one book that still don't do things outside of the hook in chronological order. And I had a book come across my desk, and the writer was talking about her ex-husband, and it was in one paragraph. I got that, but then she switched, not giving you any type of flow to let you know that she's going into this other thought, and it was her. Now she's talking about her father. So I got confused because I didn't recognize when she switched from her speaking about her husband, going to the bar, meeting this person, and having this whole thing. So I'm thinking that the first part of the paragraph was about her father, right? But she never made the reader understand that she was talking to her father. And when she went to the bar and met this guy who ended up being her husband, I'm like, whoa, you went from one guy to the bar to meeting another guy, right? And it was in the editing phase that we found that, which means that she did not do a good job self-editing. And sometimes when you are doing self editing, right, you want to make sure that it's your story. It is not the story of the editor, right? The editor polishes the story, but it is your story. You have to be as accurate as possible about your story because you are intimate with your story. You know the story, right? So don't ever just write, whether it's a whole book or you're co-author in a book or it's a devotional. Don't just write and then just say, all right, the editor will fix it. No, when you write, you have to go back and reread. You may have to put it down for a couple of days when you come back with your mind fresh and clear, when you're most creative, and reread your story so that you could see where there might be an issue, right? The word I was looking for was transition. There was no transition. Here is another great way to self edit, Leslie. And I know you may have it in your top 10, but I want to just throw this in here. And if you have it in your top 10, you can always scratch it out. But listen to your story and speak aloud. So in your Word document, there is this feature on Word document called Speak Aloud. All you have to do is open up your Word document into the Word, go to the screen. I think it's if it's a Mac, it's on the right hand side. If it's not a Mac, if it's like a Dell or a Windows, it might be on the left. But hit that button that has a little recorder like a mic and listen to what is being read. Because sometimes you see the same word over and over again. And depending on the word itself, you may think it's grammatically correct and it's not. For example, THEIR and THERE. They're both correct word, but if they're used in the wrong context, it becomes incorrect. But sometimes Grammarly or Pro Writing Aid does not pick that up. So,
Exactly.
but if you're listening and following along, sometimes if you're listening and you can hear what is being read and you're gonna, oh wait, that doesn't sound right, right? And you can go back. So it's not just about rereading your work and editing, it's also listening or having somebody read it to you. Those are some great ways of catching things in your manuscript or in your writing before you say, all right, now I feel good about this. I'm proud of my work. I did the best I could. I put the word out there. I put the story out there. Then when it gets to the editor, they're going to look at it. And depending on the type of editor you choose, a developmental editor, a copy editor, a line editor, if it's a memoir, folks, it has to be a developmental editor. Okay. They all have different roles. All three of those editors, the roles are different. What they look at is different. You don't want a copy editor to copy each sentence so beautifully, grammatically, but then there's no flow to your story. Or you don't want a line editor to just edit each line, but when you read the story top to bottom, nothing flows together, right? You need a developmental editor if you're going to be writing a story about your life, right? Or an experience you had or something that shaped your life. You need a developmental editor. But before you send it to them, do your due diligence and polish your own work in a way that make you feel proud. I wrote this, I did it. And now you're getting ready to send it. Does that make sense, Leslie?
It does. And if for whatever reason you aren't able to use the read aloud feature, don't hesitate to read it yourself. So you know your story. You know it backwards and forwards. And sometimes we write forgetting that the reader does not know our story. So if you're reading it out loud to yourself, suddenly you may realize, well, that didn't even make any sense. So you need absolutely, as one of the steps, and I have a whole bunch of steps that I recommend when I'm coaching somebody, but one of those steps is definitely in one way or another having your story so you can hear it. So time is just flying by here. So we're going to leave our 10 steps, and you can always hire me as your coach if you want to know what all 10 steps are. But let's talk a little bit about that process of self-editing, because I believe it's misunderstood a lot of times. I don't expect anyone to do this. And if you are one of my coaching clients, you've heard me tell the story about this prolific novelist who edits his own work 75 times before it goes to an editor. Can you imagine? I mean, that's too extreme. But I do recommend a number of times going through your book and doing it in different ways, because you'll catch something a little bit different every time you do that. And the best thing that you can do for yourself as you're writing your book is realize that writing it, that's only one step. And sometimes it's the quickest step out of all the steps to publication. You want to leave ample time for yourself to have to self-edit and self-edit and self-edit, going through it multiple times before it ever goes to your editor. That doesn't happen quickly, doesn't happen in 1 week. So as you are plotting out how long you have before you have to submit your book, make sure you leave enough time for that self-editing. And the very first thing that you want to do is run the whole book through some sort of grammar and spelling software. So you caught those things first. You can use Grammarly. It is a great source. There's a free version. There's a paid version. If you're serious about writing, you absolutely need the paid version. I mean, that's just a cost of being an author. And even you can have it into your, whatever that's called, your extension, and use it in your communications, use it in your emails. So Grammarly's catching all those easy boo-boos that you may not catch otherwise. There's also a software called Pro Writing Aid. I love it. Joan doesn't like it. So all of these things are good for one person, for another. Try some different methods and see what works for you. I believe Pro Writing Aid also has a free version that you can try out, but run it through that first. And then you're going to do what I call the big edit. This is the one that's going to take the most time, and you're reading through your story and you're making sure that things make sense. As Joan said, things have flow. You're not talking about something in your teens and talking about something in your 50s and talking about something in your 20s, and now you're in your 30s. You want to have that flow. Read it from the mindset of someone who doesn't know your story to make sure that you don't lose your readers along the way. Every time you do an edit to your book, run it through Grammarly or Pro Writing Aid, whatever you're using again. So each time you make a change, you're catching those little things that can pop up. And as Joan said, one of those major major steps is listening to your book. It's absolutely a non-negotiable. You will be blown away by what you catch when you listen to your own book. And again, as I said, you want to make sure that you're leaving enough time so you don't feel that choking of this deadline that's just looming over your head. Think about the most common writing errors that happen, and fix those things so that when you do your final read through, and I like to suggest that the final read through before it goes to the editor is done live. You're listening to it one last time. And every time you make a change, you're going to run it through Grammarly again. So you can see how time can really build up here, and you might spend 2 or 3 weeks just in the editing stage. But make sure before it goes off to an editor that you've gotten it to be the very best that you can submit to your editor, and then they can take that really awesome book and take it to the next level. Go from a great book to an exemplary book that somebody won't be able to put down, that they're going to tell all their friends about. And if you're going to leave a legacy, don't you want it to be something that's exemplary? So give editing, self-editing, the time, the respect, the space that is required to get it to that level. Your thoughts, Joan?
I love it. It's a perfect. And you gave them the top five, right? Number one was the
Yes.
book. Number two was building the characters and making sure that you are really identifying the character, even if it's you. Number three was don't do all these long paragraphs, okay? Cut them up. We don't need to read one whole page is one paragraph. And then you said what was four, and I know five was flashback.
Right. And number 4 is a new paragraph for each person speaking in
Yes.
dialogue.
Okay.
And
Awesome.
don't shy away from that in nonfiction writing, by the way. Dialogue can be a great way. It's one of the tools, the creative tools in nonfiction writing to help keep attention alive.
Yeah. I love that too. So, all right, guys, that's all we have for today. Thank you so much for joining us here on Books, Business, and Brunch, brought to you by the team at Victorious Youth Press. And we look forward to seeing you next Monday, same time, place, same place. We will have another topic for you. And so, without further ado, we're going to say goodbye, right, Leslie?
All right.
Goodbye.
Have a great week.
Have a fantastic week, everybody, and we'll see you next time. Bye.